let me say I love my mom and I'm always going to have respect for everything she did as a single parent. She did the best she could for what she had, especially with her mental state. And I don't fault anybody for having mental illness at all. But like I mentioned, my mom's the type of person who lacks accountability for her actions. And when I'm only human, it's never any kind of like, I'm really sorry that my actions hurt you in that way. How can we make it any better? And I'm not even asking for her to make up for things that happened in my childhood because I'm a full-ass adult. And that's just, we're not going to do that. I'll heal myself with the stuff that happened in my childhood. But me speaking on it and bringing it up doesn't mean I'm trying to sit there and be like, Mom, you. It's just something I'm healing from.
Stephanie Jenkins' messy, tangled back and forth with her mum has taken yet another sharp and dramatic turn, and this time, even the way she tells the story raises eyebrows. From the very first word in her latest private update, Stephanie framed herself as the one making the effort and her mother as the one blocking progress. She told her private subscribers that she had finally confronted her mother, something she had been talking about for weeks, and built it up like it was going to be this raw, emotional, maybe even healing conversation. But right away, before she even described what happened, she made sure to warn her audience that it went exactly as she predicted. That's important because in Stephanie's world, when she predicts failure ahead of time, it's usually her way of setting the stage, so any disappointment can be blamed on someone else, in this case, her mum. Instead of focusing on the positives or any small step toward reconciliation, Stephanie went straight into complaints. She said her mom didn't take accountability, wasn't genuinely open to reconnecting like she had told everyone she would be, and even, according to Stephanie, told a bunch of lies to the public. These are strong words, especially from someone who has her own history of resharing timelines, leaving out key facts and telling versions of events that don't quite line up with documented reality. That's what makes this part of the story so tricky. On one side, you have Stephanie, who has been caught in contradictions and outright lies before. On the other, you have her mother, who, while not perfect, has mostly been measured, respectful, and at times openly self-reflective in public. So, which account do we believe? The one laced with built-in excuses and past inconsistencies, or the one that's been steadier even under heavy criticism? The setup for disappointment. In her sub-only update, Stephanie kicked things off by saying she loves her mom and feels grateful for being raised by a single mother, adding the phrase, even with her mental state. That last part instantly caught attention. The way she said it had a sting, as if she were sliding in a subtle insult toward people who have mental health struggles, almost suggesting they can't be good parents. She must have realized how it sounded because she quickly followed up with a softening statement that she wasn't faulting anyone for having mental health issues. But by then, the undertone had already landed, and it's the kind of remark that sticks in people's minds. From there, she moved into one of her most familiar talking points, the claim that her mother never takes accountability. According to Stephanie, whenever she tries to hold her mom responsible for something, her mom responds with a simple, I'm only human. She presented this as if it were a brush off, but the irony is hard to miss. This is almost identical to how Stephanie reacts when people call her out.
First of all, let me say I love my mom and I'm always going to have respect for everything she did as a single parent. She did the best she could for what she had, especially with her mental state. And I don't fault anybody for having mental illness at all. But like I mentioned, my mom's the type of person who lacks accountability for her actions. And when called out,
are we really going to talk about accountability, staph infection?
Generally, her response is no different than, I'm only human. It's never any kind of like, I'm really sorry that my actions hurt you in that way. How can we make it any better? And I'm not even asking for her to make up for things that happened in my childhood because I'm a full-ass adult. And that's just, we're not going to do that. I'll heal myself with the stuff that happened in my childhood. But me speaking on it and bringing it up doesn't mean I'm trying to sit there and be like, Mom, you. It's just something I'm healing from.
Over the years, she's been confronted about long, exhausting list of choices that directly affect her children's quality of life. People have called her out for refusing to secure a stable home, allowing the kids to remain in cramped and temporary living situations for months at a time. They've pointed out how she rarely takes them out for simple joys like park visits, community events, or even a quick trip for ice cream. She skipped family trips altogether and has been seen avoiding even basic purchases like seasonal clothes or age-appropriate toys. Every time, instead of acknowledging these concerns, she pivots the blame. Sometimes she singles out Drew, telling viewers he checked out on her and left her to handle everything alone. Other times, she shifts the blame to a larger focus, pointing at the government and claiming the economy is too hard for a single mom to survive in. And if those explanations don't feel convincing enough, she leans on faith, telling people that's just how God made it happen, as if those words close the discussion and erase any personal responsibility. The end result? In every scenario, nothing changes for the kids. She has had years, not weeks, not months, but years, and multiple clear chances to take meaningful, concrete steps to improve her children's day-to-day lives. Yet, she stays trapped in the same loop, pointing fingers outward while staying still herself. Her audience has seen the cycle repeat so many times that it's almost predictable. Stephanie is step-siding responsibility while subtly implying that others should bear the weight she refuses to pick up.
Happen as an adult, especially these lives that she got up on and spoke things about me that weren't even accurate. So I took the time to speak to my mom about that and ask her, hey, what's up with that? There's things you spoke on those lives that aren't even true about me. You know, you got on a live with over 8 people or more that have nothing but terrible things to say about me, who want to paint this picture about me, about your daughter who you've known my entire life. And you could have sat there and defended what you know about me as a person, but you chose to be on their side and further the fuel because you spread lies that didn't even need to be spread.
In that light, her criticism of her mother for supposedly lacking accountability doesn't read like a genuine grievance. It reads like she's staring into a mirror and describing herself. Here's the difference. Stephanie's mom has gone on record more than once to admit she wasn't perfect. She's openly acknowledged that maybe some of her own shortcomings played a role in how Stephanie turned out, even while stressing that she poured as much love, effort, and care into raising her daughter as she could. She hasn't tried to rewrite history or pretend she was flawless. She's been candid about mistakes, about the challenges of being a single mom, and about her hope that Stephanie could grow beyond any rough patches from childhood. That, the willingness to say, I wasn't perfect and I own that, is what accountability looks like. Which is why it feels so strange to hear Stephanie repeatedly claim her mother never takes any. Stephanie also took issue with her mother not directly apologizing for her childhood or offering specific steps to repair whatever damage she feels was done. Yet, in the same breath, she said she wasn't going to push for an apology because she's grown and can heal on her own.
What happened as an adult, especially these lives that she got up on and spoke things about me that weren't even accurate. So I took the time to speak to my mom about that and ask her, hey, what's up with that? There's things you spoke on those lives that aren't even true about me. You know, you got on a live with over 8 people or more that have nothing but terrible things to say about me, who want to paint this picture about me, about your daughter who you've known my entire life. And you could have sat there and defended what you know about me as a person, but you chose to be on their side and further the fuel because you spread lies that didn't even need to be spread. For instance, my mom mentioned that when I was with my ex, it was an ultimatum with CPS. Either I leave him or I get my kids taken away. That was not the case. In fact, when I was dealing with CPS with my ex, we ended up having a family therapist who came in for a few visits. She stayed there while we were making dinner and just doing our normal family thing. And she said, I don't see anything wrong with this family. We don't need to stay in this situation. CPS was out of my life when it came to my ex. I left voluntarily because I was done with his crap. I figured out who the frick he actually was, and I left running.
On the surface, that might sound mature, but the tone she used made it clear she was still holding the grievance close and still using it as part of the narrative that her mother has somehow failed her in an ongoing way. The real twist here is the irony. While pointing fingers at her mom's past parenting, Stephanie's own children are living through circumstances that, to many outside observers, look far worse than anything she's described about her own upbringing. Her mother, even as a struggling single parent, held jobs, kept a roof over their heads, and stretched every resource to make ends meet. Stephanie, by contrast, has kept her children in a single cramped room for more than 5 months, with no stable income and no concrete plan for securing a permanent home. This isn't a brief setback, it's a prolonged, avoidable situation. And instead of shielding her kids from the sting of disappointment, she's done the opposite. She's normalized it. In one live stream, when Drew refused to take their daughter to the store for donuts, Stephanie turned to the girl and flatly told her to get used to being disappointed. That moment struck many as heartbreaking, not just because of the missed donuts, but because it summed up a larger truth about the atmosphere her children are growing up in. If Stephanie wants her mother to dig up decades-old wounds and apologize for them, the question becomes unavoidable. Will she one day do the same for her children? Judging by her track record, it's hard to imagine her taking that step. Another claim Stephanie made was that her mom has been spreading lies about her on live streams, often with multiple other people present. She described confronting her mom about it directly, asking why she would paint a picture of her in such a negative light when, in Stephanie's words, her mother has known her entire life. The way Stephanie framed it, she wanted viewers to think her mother had deliberately misrepresented her to a public audience. But here's the reality. The version of Stephanie most people believe hasn't been built by her mom's words. It's been shaped almost entirely by Stephanie's own actions and the content she has willingly posted online. Her mother never had to tell anyone that Stephanie comes across as an irresponsible parent who avoids steady work and puts her children low on her priority list. That impression was formed over time through Stephanie's own live streams, updates, and public behavior. One specific example of these so-called lies she cited was her mom allegedly claiming that Stephanie only left her husband Jeremiah because CPS gave her an ultimatum: either separate from him or lose her children. Stephanie flat out denies this, insisting that when CPS was involved, a family therapist came to the house a few times, observed their daily life even while they were making dinner, and ultimately found nothing wrong before closing the case. She says her decision to leave Jeremiah was based solely on the fact that she realized who he was, not because of any CPS intervention. But there is a glaring hole in that explanation. Jeremiah's background was not a hidden secret. He was already a registered sex offender for sexually abusing his own mother well before Stephanie ever married him. Her mom warned her repeatedly. She chose to ignore those warnings. Not only did she marry him anyway, she went on to have 2 children with him, and to this day, she has not divorced him. Her mother even provided her with money specifically to file for divorce. Yet, Stephanie used that money for something else. So, if she truly left Jeremiah because she finally realized who he was, the obvious question hangs in the air. Why is she still legally married to him now? Stephanie also accused her mom and several others in the family of calling CPS on her without first checking on her in person. She presented it as if they acted behind her back in a sneaky, underhanded way. But in reality, by that point, Stephanie had already cut off contact with her family, a move that has become almost predictable whenever she's in a relationship with a man, Drew included. She had made it clear they were not welcome to visit or intervene directly, leaving them with very few safe or non-confrontational options. From her mom's perspective, the priority wasn't to see Stephanie, chat with her, or try to mend fences in that moment. It was to make sure the children were safe. The kids hadn't chosen to live under the same roof as a man with a dangerous past, and they had no say in the living conditions Stephanie was keeping them in. So for her mom and others, calling CPS wasn't about attacking Stephanie personally. It was about triggering the one channel that could legally and formally check on the kids' welfare without escalating things into a volatile face-to-face confrontation. In their view, this was the safest, most controlled, and most effective way to get eyes on the situation and ensure the children's safety when direct communication with Stephanie was impossible.
So her heroic act on that part, no. She did call CPS, my sister did call CPS, but they never took the time to actually check on me themselves. Like, my mom wasn't even talking to me. It was the same situation with, like it is with me and Drew. I cut my mom out because she was, to me, a toxic person, and I needed space to heal before I could actually have that relationship back in my life.
Stephanie's own words twisted into a knot of contradictions. At one point, she claimed her mom was the one who stopped talking to her, framing it in a way that made her sound like the abandoned daughter and fairly shut out and left behind. But only moments later, she completely flipped the script, ascertaining that she had been the one who cut her mom off because she found out her toxic and needed time to heal before inviting her back into her life. These aren't just minor differences in wording. They are two opposite explanations for the same event. Both cannot be fully true, and the quick switch between them was so abrupt it almost felt like she forgot the version she wanted to stick with. For anyone listening closely, it raised serious doubts about her consistency and credibility. By contrast, her mom's version of events has been steady and clear over time. Whenever Stephanie gets involved with a man, she distances herself from her family, cutting off communication and pushing them out. When you line up that explanation against Stephanie's history, it fits like a glove. And what's happening now with Drew follows the same well-worn pattern, the story shifting just each time to shield her current relationship while recasting her family in a negative light for the audience. Stephanie ended the update by declaring that this was the first time in her life she felt healthy enough to have a relationship with her mom. It was a big statement, clearly meant to signal personal growth, but for anyone watching, her physical appearance told a different, more complicated story. She looked tense and on edge. Her skin seemed dry, her face drawn with fatigue, and her overall demeanor carried the weight of someone under constant stress. Nothing about her energy or appearance gave off the glow of newfound health she was claiming. It's entirely possible that her reaching out had less to do with a sudden wave of emotional well-being and more to do with other pressures in her life, like sensing Drew pulling away or realizing she might soon need her mom's help. If that's the case, taking the step to ask for help could actually be a positive move. But the way she approached it undercut the potential good. Instead of opening the door with vulnerability or willingness to rebuild without conditions, she framed the conversation to once again cast her mother as the antagonist. It wasn't just a reach for connection, it was a reach made with one hand while the other kept pointing the blame. The long history of attacks. This isn't the first time Stephanie has publicly gone after her mom in a way that leaves lasting damage. She has accused her of creating a toxic home, blamed her for deep emotional scars, and, in a shocking live stream slip, even implied her mother sexually abused her. That last accusation was devastating. Her mom was visibly shaken and hurt, taking to a live stream of her own to address it. In that moment, she said she could not believe her own daughter would make such an extreme and damaging claim to vilify her in the eyes of others. These kinds of accusations haven't been rare outbursts. They have formed a repeated pattern. Over the years, Stephanie has leaned on these claims as justification for cutting her mom out of her life and refusing to let her have contact with the kids. The heartbreaking part is that this often meant the children were left in unstable or unhealthy environments instead of being with a grandmother who, by most accounts, was willing and able to provide stability. And now, in what Stephanie frames as an attempt to make amends, the dynamic hasn't really shifted. She is still, in subtle and not so subtle ways, painting her mom as the villain in the story. It's the same exhausting cycle, one that leaves viewers tired of hearing it and surely leaves her mom even more drained. At this point, it's not hard to imagine why her mom might finally be ready to step away from trying altogether. What's your take on all this? After hearing both her version and the long list of contradictions stacked against it, do you believe Stephanie is finally being honest this time, or does it feel yet like another spin in the same tired story we've had before? The details raise a lot of questions, and the patterns are hard to ignore. So, where do you land on it? If you want to keep following this unfolding drama and see where the next twist leads, make sure to stay tuned in because with Stephanie, there really is always another chapter waiting just around the corner.